Hello, happy Memorial Day to fellow Burns family members and anyone who stumbles across this video. I just wanted to take a few minutes to record a story that I heard from my grandfather, Robert Anthony Burns, about his service in World War II, especially because Hiroshima has been in the news lately with President Obama's visit there. We have a unique story, and I think only a few people in our family actually have it. So the reason I ended up getting a chance to hear Grandpa tell this story was back in my freshman year of high school. I'm 36, so that's maybe 23 years ago now. We read the book Hiroshima by John Hersey, and we were asked to interview anybody who was alive at the time about their perspectives on the use of nuclear weapons. And we went to go visit Grandpa and Grandma, and we sat around their old table on Hathaway Road, and he probably smoked a pack that night. But he told us about his different experiences in the war. He served as a machinist mate. We don't know his rank offhand, but I can refine the story in further tellings if we really want. But he worked on the instrument panels of PBY flying boats. It's an airplane that served as bomber and reconnaissance in the Pacific Theater. And he told us the story of how a kamikaze hit his boat. He got knocked off the ship. He was naked at the time. And it's my understanding that he didn't like talking about his service all that much. Dad says that when we went to interview him that night, that was the first time he'd heard any of this stuff. I mean, he knew he was hit by a kamikaze, but the Hiroshima story, I think, has a bit more character, and I wanted to share that with everybody. So how it goes, like I said, he worked on the instrument panels on these airplanes. Dad says it's because he was a watchmaker's apprentice before the war, and he actually signed up when he was 17, I think, so he wasn't really eligible. He just lied about his age and got in, but they took him right away. And he was out working on a boat with a flying boat with a few other crew members, and turns out they left without him. So they were on this tender ship, the Kenneth Whiting, and he and a few other mechanics were out on this boat, but they left without him. He was working in the cockpit or in the tail or something like that, and he was out there by himself for some number of hours. I'm going to say 4. And nobody really knew what happened to him. I suppose they didn't have occasion to care, but eventually a boat pulls up, and inside of it is all this brass. That's the word he used. I didn't know what brass meant when he told me, but Dad was in on it because he was in the Navy too. But a bunch of admirals and captains and generals, bigwigs, come up in this shore boat and shuttle boat, and my understanding is that they knew that Grandpa was out there, but Dad says they took off without knowing. But I'm going to go with the less perhaps exaggerated version of the story. So they come out there and they see the sailor out there and kind of huddle amongst themselves and say, what are we going to do? But basically they say, screw it, and they say, we'll take him with us. They didn't tell him where at the moment. But what they wanted was to go take a look at the devastation from the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. And so they flew this plane out and they cruised over the site. And Dad says they were gone for days. I think it was just a flyover, but we'll see if other family members have better details. But they fly over the city, and I should note that as he's telling the story, his pace slows down. I don't know if any of you remember Grandpa, but he smoked all those years, and later in his years, he'd still tap his finger like he still had the cigarette between his hands. But he just kind of sat there with his cigarette over the ashtray and kind of talked slowly, but you could see that he was seeing what he saw then. And I don't remember too many of the words, but I don't think he described it in many more words than this, that it was just a sea of yellow. And that was an unexpected description to me. It was a sea of yellow, and the only thing standing was 2 smokestacks from a factory. And so when they were done touring it, they flew him back. He got reported AWOL for the incident. Dad said he went to captain's mast, but was ultimately, there was no mark put on his record or anything like that. And just as a historical note, the purpose of us interviewing him at this time was talking about the ethics of that decision to use nuclear weapons, and he had no minced words. He said, "No, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You have to understand what life was like then." So that was his story, that he got drafted into a first-hand view of the devastation at Hiroshima the day after. So I don't think many people have that experience, and it's in our heritage. So that's the story, Burns. Hope you enjoyed it.